Hello, and welcome to the Mindful Momentum podcast. I'm your host, Robin Todd, and I'm super excited today, as always, to talk with Jessica Thomas, who is our guest today. Really diving a little bit deeper into school districts and kids and teens, which, as a former classroom teacher, I'm passionate about, and we have worked diligently for many years with our programs at Mindful Momentum to help kids and teens. So I'm excited about our conversation. But let me tell you a little bit about Jessica. She has been teaching teens for 23 years. You're so young. How's that possible, right? And has recently expanded her passion for education into the realm of health coaching in the past few years. This new venture fits into her personal business and her work in schools. Outside of her professional life, she loves attending live music events, engaging in outdoor activities, and watching documentaries. Ooh, what's your favorite documentary?
I get sucked into, any really. I don't know why the real stories get me more, but I get sucked into like the scam artist ones.
Yeah, there's so many.
There are so many.
And some people like the history ones. Some people like
right now
serial killer ones.
I'm into a TV show that's like a documentary-ish about people getting out of prison and then going and living with a roommate.
Okay.
And and how all that works.
Yes,
it's fascinating.
It is. Well, because that's really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, to like be re-entered into life after
Yeah, you
prison.
realize just how the system does not support that.
Well, and with a brother who's incarcerated and has been most of his adult life, and he has really had trouble being successful outside of that setting.
It's very common.
It is.
Very common.
I know. Anyway, sorry. We digress.
Okay.
Let's see. And she channels her creativity in her Breakout on the Go business, which is super fun. Got to experience that a few months ago, where she spends a lot of time crafting innovative clues. Really today, I would love for us just to talk a little bit about what's inspired you to focus on mental health and mindfulness in education. You've been doing this for a little while.
Yeah. Well, teaching-wise, I have been doing for a long time, but everything kind of came full circle for me right after COVID, when our school district went to having different pathways in high schools. And one of those pathways was health and wellness. And there came an opportunity to have a teaching role in teaching a freshman class called Intro to Body and Mind Wellness. And my undergrad degree is in something called fitness and wellness. I never did anything with that degree. I went into teaching. And so here,
like many people,
20 some years later, then this class becomes a thing. And so I applied for it and interviewed. And I'm like, this is what I went to school for. Like, this is finally a way for me to put all of my education and what my passion was a while back. It shifted, of course, into play. And so I got that role as the teacher of that freshman class. And then because of that, the school district then put me through your program. And then my world just blew up with how mindfulness is so important and can change people's lives. So then I'm teaching that to freshmen and realizing, oh boy, yeah, they needed this a long time ago. And so then I did that for 2 years, and then they got rid of the class. So it's not there anymore. But now that I have my certification, I can go ahead and teach mindfulness to tweens, to teens, to any grade level, really, and get it to them that way if it's not happening in the classroom.
What I think is so interesting is that that was the gift of COVID, right? I think that
it was.
We did have kids and teens struggling prior to that, but I think as a culture, as a community of just human beings, the awareness was elevated.
It was for me. During that lockdown, I got into meditation. I got into doing yoga more. I started eating healthier, exercising more. Just everything shifted for me. And then it's like, oh, and I'm happier. In the middle of this crisis, I started flourishing. And then it's like,
What a beautiful
okay,
thing.
so now when we're getting back to normal, that kind of goes away. And it shouldn't.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be normal
No.
for that to go away.
When that's
and
our
you just get back
challenge.
to busy.
Yes. And that's our challenge, is not to shift back to
Mm-hmm.
life before that, to keep kind of tapping into those things that we've learned so that we can keep growing. And I
Yep.
see that everywhere, where even in organizations that really recognize and we're really investing in their people, we've kind of just shifted back, and it's like, oh, because we quickly forget that
Right.
anxiety really hasn't changed. Stress hasn't really stress maybe has shifted a little bit. The stress of the fear of COVID was certainly high then, but just life stressors
There's still
are still
stresses.
here. They're still here.
Still stresses.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I'm curious as to, since you work with teens on a regular basis and tweens, what is it that, what is their life like? What are they stressing about? What are they dealing with?
Well,
that's
I've
creating
asked them that specific question. What bothers you the most? What causes you anxiety more than anything else? And overwhelmingly, their answers are the future. They're not worried about their test next week. They're worried about life after high school. They're worried about adulting. They're worried about jobs or college or money. That's the biggest thing. They're worried about what life looks like after high school. It's not really the stresses at that time in high school. I mean, of course, there's that too.
Right.
I've had people run up to me at the football field going, Miss Thomas, I need some mindfulness help. I've got,
The friend
teenage
stuff.
drama. Yeah. So, and that's what with the younger kids, like, 10, 11, 12 that I've worked with, it is more social stuff, dealing with friends, dealing with peers, and that peer pressure. Right. And, but the older kids, it's definitely the future.
Yeah. So how do you see mindfulness and resilience skills impacting them? And I know many districts and many parents are looking for social emotional curriculums to help their kids. How do you see that playing a part, and what impact could that make?
I've thought about this, because we can have a curriculum for the kids, but what that does is turn into just another curriculum. Yes. Where they are going, why do I need this? When am I going to use this? Well, we know that they're going to use it. If they learn it and learn the tools, of course they're going to use it the rest of their lives, but they're not in the space to take that in yet until they need it, until they're running up to me at the football game saying, I'm dealing with something, can you talk me through it? But I guess just getting them the tools and drilling in those tools so when the time comes, they can reach into that toolbox and use them. But I know in just my experience of teaching those freshmen this life-changing stuff, they didn't care. They didn't care right away. They didn't need it. Of course they need it. Yeah. But in their heads, they didn't need it yet. I was just another teacher teaching them something that they had to sit in class and listen to. So it's a really, really big challenge to get them to understand that this is life that I'm helping you with. We're not just teaching you another curriculum that you have to take a test on, right. And that's a big, big mind shift that they need, because they've been conditioned to sit in class and listen to an adult teach them stuff that most of the time they don't want to learn.
Yeah. Teens.
So, yeah. And so they've done that for over a decade, and then here they are as freshmen with enough other things on their plate, and I'm trying to teach them something that is completely mind-blowing and that can change their life. So it has to start young, yeah. Right? Yeah. It has to be something that is common to them and just a common language that they get from, well, even before they start school, really. But in school, it doesn't need to be a separate or a curriculum like everything else. It just needs to be the norm. Yeah. And it needs to be part of the language. and the norm that the whole school does every day, not one teacher. Mm-hmm. And if that becomes the norm for that building, then it can become the norm for each individual.
And you're talking about cultural shifts.
Just, yeah, absolutely.
Which is a slow process.
Well, yeah, that's not easy to do.
Because we have, and I'd love to touch on a few of the things that you just said. One is that it's not a one and done.
No.
Right? You just go check. Okay. I mean, if it were that easy, right, we'd all be happy, healthy people all the time.
Well, and that's how schools, in my experience anyway, that's how schools handle social emotional learning. Is it's just this
separate
on the side. Now we're going to do this, when it really can tie into anything and everything, and should.
Yeah. Well, and actually, when we developed our high school programming, we had that in mind. So each year, it changes and gets a little deeper, but they actually have a piece of mindfulness and resilience, skill building practices from each year. It's a little different and a little deeper for 4 years. And then it's like, then they're going to be going out in the world with a really deep understanding and practice of exactly what you said, not just kind of something I do separate from my life, but actually becomes who we are.
Right.
That's
and I also mentioned how, it needs to start when they're young, so then it's just a common thing. But also, the adults have to believe
that was the other thing I was going to touch on. Yes, no, it's true.
Yeah, because your curriculum isn't going to matter if the adults don't have the buy-in and don't live that way. And if it's not a part of them, then it is just another thing. And it's not just lived within the culture.
Well, and that was a conversation that I had early on with Dr. Maria Hunt when we developed this, because we know that from research, the degree to which the person teaching it embodies those practices and is modeling it significantly increases the degree to which those students will adopt those practices. Because the old adage of do as I say, not as I do, we know doesn't work. No. I don't even know who came up with that. Somebody who wanted the easy way out. Right?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't work that way. And the other thing I love about that is that we can pour into teachers, because teachers are struggling. And they need it for their own lives and their own struggles of managing these kids that are coming to them that have a lot more things that they're dealing with, and the parents. And I mean, teaching has become significantly more difficult than it was when I started 30 plus years ago, and I just see that. And so it is a great opportunity for districts to really begin. That was a requirement for our programming, is that teachers had to have it first so that they could at least begin the journey. Some of them may choose not to. You can't push a rope there, but at least they're exposed to it prior to kind of sharing that with students. And, it's been a slow-moving train. It's
well, one of the biggest issues in education is not enough time.
It's about time.
It's always about time.
Yes.
The teachers don't have enough time to teach what they're supposed to be teaching. They definitely don't have enough time to take care of themselves.
Yes.
And the leadership doesn't allow time for all of these things that we're talking about. Yeah. It comes down to numbers and tests and all that stuff that we know.
And there's a lot of layers. And I'm always very mindful of my own practice of just not making judgment on these entities that are perhaps doing the best they can with where they are. And I applaud those small steps that they do make towards, supporting kids. And I feel like many of them are continuing, and many people within those, whether it's, all of the administration, is supporting that or not, but there are individuals who are trying to make a difference in that space.
And like we just said, if they don't live it, if they haven't had this total life-changing moment like I did in day one of your class, where I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is going to change my life. And it did. And I have embodied it. And my whole life has changed until someone experiences that it is just going to be
Going through the
something.
motions.
Yeah, just something that we should do, something that we want to talk about. We use the word mindfulness all the time without actually knowing what it means. And yeah.
Well, and I think it does go back to, especially people who work with others, we know, especially as teachers, what I embody, I'm naturally going to want to share with my students. It's just because you feel it and you know the benefits, so you inadvertently want to share that, whatever that is, whether that's eating healthy and exercising, and that's what you're kind of threading through messages that you're giving and how you influence the students that you teach. Well, let's talk a little bit about what you've seen, the evolution of students. So I would love to share with you, and I don't even know if you know this, that how this all began for me, because we really just started out with the adult curriculum, and I was volunteering in my daughter's second grade classroom in Blue Springs. Have I told you this story before?
No.
And I was going in just for fun, and I always love to put my teacher hat on every once in a while. And I was like, I'll just do some mindfulness lessons with them. So I just kind of would adapt them. And there was a moment where one of her students, who was a really tough kiddo, I'll never forget it. And he said that day, there is nothing good in me. I will never be good. And I later found out that in first grade, he had talked about taking his own life. It was a moment for me that was like, oh my gosh, I cannot imagine a child at that age feeling so hopeless and so helpless. And that really planted in me this inspiration, which of course I have no doubt is the Holy Spirit, but in that, how can we get all of these tools and skills that we traditionally had been teaching adults into a format that was relatable and developmentally appropriate for kids. And so that really began my journey of developing my hero within, and it was so fun. It's been a labor of love, and it's evolved over the years, but that was really the first inspiration, because as we've already kind of touched on, how do we just start equipping these kids with these, empowering them with these skills so they don't know any different? They hit a challenge, they hit an obstacle. Oh, yeah, I've got a superpower for that. So we call them our superpowers, because we all have all those things within us, right? To navigate them, we just don't know, we're not aware, we don't know how to use them, and so it's empowering them instead of needing all these other people to help me get through those things. I've also recently learned, which I'm very excited about, is that our curriculum is a great complement to the Conscious Discipline program. And so partnering with schools to teach the teachers mindfulness so they can implement the conscious discipline piece, but also, how it all fits together, because it all just kind of complements each other to create that robust, culture that we talked about. So tell us a little bit about some of your students that you worked with, and some in particular, because I found my inspiration from you when you would reach out to me about like just aha moments that kids had.
Yeah, I did have a lot of those. I don't know how many I'm going to be able to remember today, but talking about my hero within, I did use that curriculum last summer with an 11-year-old, and as I was going through it, I was like, well, this can be used for adults too. Well, yeah. I mean,
because it's the same curriculum.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But like that whole superpower thing, I was like, this isn't just for kids. I'm going to be using that word moving forward. But one thing is that I spend a lot of time working with kids at our alternative schools, which in next year I will be spending most of my time at alternative schools, kids K through 12. So that it's going to be interesting how I can tie this into all of those grade levels. But my goal is, because I do have a little bit more freedom at those schools as far as what I teach and what I do in the library lessons, I plan on sneaking a lot of mindfulness lessons into that, because they it's hard for them every day.
Well, and those are kids who really need that emotional regulation. I mean, all kids do, all teens do, we all do, but that in particular, they haven't obviously been able to kind of harness their superpowers for good.
Right.
Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. But I love that you're going to have an opportunity to pour into them that way.
I'm really excited about that, and I'll have a lot of aha moments that I'll be able to share with you from those kids. But just my freshmen, over the 2 years I got to teach it, I think the biggest thing for me is when they come back to me outside of class time to tell me that they used something that they learned, or I thought, what would Miss Thomas do here? Or, things like that made me go, okay, so maybe if they didn't want it or need it at that time that they were learning it, at least it stuck with them enough.
Well, isn't this teens? Right.
Yeah, I
Even
know.
as a parent.
Every teacher can sit
You
here
think
and say
they're not
the exact
listening.
same thing. Right, yeah.
You think they're not listening, and then later, but they are, even though they act cool about it. Yeah. So, Jessica, let's talk a little bit about, certainly school districts and schools have a prime opportunity to impact kids because they have this captive audience, and they're there for 6-7 hours a day, and we know that teachers and staff members in schools greatly impact the development of kids. But I also believe that it takes a village. There's a lot of people in our society, in our culture, in our world, in our families that have opportunities to impact kids. And so tell us a little bit about how you see that fitting in different spaces where you've had an opportunity to influence and kind of plant those seeds of mindfulness and resilience with kids.
Well, I did in my class make it a point to send things home for them to do with their families, to like ask your parents about this and try to get that language going in their household. I also thought about, and I don't teach the class anymore, so I would have to do this outside of class, maybe have a family night at school, bring in the families and do a little activity or something to introduce it there. And then hopefully that would grow into, okay, maybe the parents loved it so much, even if the kids didn't yet, and then they could sign them up for a summer camp.
Yes.
Or they could join the club that we do during the day, during an off hour that they might have or something like that.
And I love that because parenting is so difficult.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of good books on mindful parenting. And I know I've worked with different parents as a former parent educator with parents as teachers. And I love that because that's a natural, organic way for kids to start to learn it. It's a win-win because parents are learning those skills to be able to respond in ways that are mindful to their kids. Then they're also modeling it and creating that language.
I just think giving them any extra tools to have a little easier life or easier conversations at home would be very valuable. But it would have to be outside of school time, which is fine. Teachers do that all of the time. And I know just outside of the school day, the Girls Empowerment Sparkle Conference that Raytown Schools did, I got to do a 30-minute mindfulness talk to these girls that were pulled out of school that day to just be there to talk about ways to be empowered as females. And it was amazing. And so I just think Raytown Schools they're on the right path into getting this kind of stuff into the lives of teenagers. And that was a great event for everyone involved, the adults and the kids.
Well, and I even think about coaches. Think about how
I've gone down that road too, thinking I need to be talking to every team in my school about how mindfulness can make them better at their sport.
Yes. I mean, all Olympic athletes, I love when the Olympics come out because, those little stories about them. I mean, all of them practice mindfulness.
Of course they do.
It's such an important part of their, of their training. And it's like, oh my gosh, what a gift we could start to give those, those younger athletes who aspire to that level of training. I mean, even if they never get to that level of playing college or the Olympics, the rare, folks who do, but yeah, what a prime opportunity.
Yeah. Again, another way to get outside of the classroom, but still impact those teens so strongly.
And even in clubs or
music.
Oh, absolutely.
Music classes and performers.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, there's so much research in all of that. Mm-hmm. It's been really fun to dive in. And I feel like, well, of course, I'm celebrating 10 years of being in business. And 10 years ago, the majority of people did not even know what mindfulness was. And I'm so grateful that it has been. And I knew when we started, we were on the cusp of something bigger, but we weren't there yet. And so it was so many conversations. And it afforded me the opportunity to really dive into the research and find all these spaces. Mm-hmm. That's what I love about mindfulness. And I can talk forever about mindfulness and my passion for it. But I always tell people the return on investment is so huge because it impacts every engagement you have with a person, every presence you have in a room, every conversation you have with all the hats you wear.
Your alone time.
Too. Yes. Mm-hmm. Your relationship with yourself, with every person you meet. The investment is so small compared to the return of just filtering into all those
Absolutely.
spaces.
And I can go on forever about that too, Robin.
I know.
Thanks to you.
Yeah. How do you feel like it's impacted your life the most? Where do you see?
Oh, gosh. It's the same thing about when I was teaching this to my niece who was 8 years old at the time. And
you did your practice training with her. That's
and
right.
I talked about how I talk all the time about how my very first class with you, that very first class where I was like, ooh, okay, I've heard of mindfulness. I had a therapist that mentioned it at one point, but never really taught it. And then that very first class, I was like, well, this is gonna change my life. And I mentioned that earlier. And my niece, who was 8 at the time, said the exact same thing. She's like, oh, a very first class, I can really see how this could change people's lives. And it does. And it did. And talk about return on investment. I mean, that was the first 20 minutes of the program.
Yes.
But how it really affected my life, I had been living by myself for many years and just kind of started spiraling into this cocoon, I guess, where I was getting anxiety about being social. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to leave the house because I didn't want to deal with the stress of a parking spot. And then the littler things started turning into bigger things. I started having panic attacks for the first time ever. Yeah. Didn't even know what that meant, and until you experience it, it's like, what was causing all of that? And I just needed some tools to make my mind not sabotage me. Yeah. And I use that word all the time. I use your brain facts all of the time. And I start with our brain sabotages us all of the time unless we teach it not to. Yeah. And so I started teaching my brain to stop sabotaging me.
What a great, I
and
love
so
that.
Now I see a therapist regularly, and I feel like I'm just so open and I'm very much more aware of what's going on in my body and how I am responding to things. And so I just have a little more calmness I'm still pretty animated and loud and all of that, which it will never change. And I don't necessarily want it to or need it to.
We're all
person.
We're all a work in progress.
Sure.
No matter where we are.
But I'm a calmer person. I don't respond with emotion like I did for so many years that never served me well at all. And so I just have more control over my brain and my emotions and how I respond to things, and my life is better for it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
I want other people to feel what I feel. Yeah. I want to get it out to as many people as possible without, beating beating it over their heads or just being like, oh, here comes Jessica again. She's going to talk about mindfulness.
Well, I know. And then we have to go back to our own practice of not being judgmental, right? Of knowing that everyone's in they're on their own path and their own journey. And it's not my responsibility to win them over. It's a personal thing, but that's hard because we want other people to experience what we have experienced, because we know how much joy there is and how much fuller and fulfilled we are after we do exactly what you do. And you put the hard work in. That's what I always say. It's like I just always feel like I am honored to be, a recipient of just the view, the watching of the unfolding of people, putting the work in to then get to where they are. And it's why I keep doing what I'm doing. And it happens to almost everyone I work with at some level. And most people aren't the very first one, which is so fun to hear. Sometimes it takes a little longer, but almost I can't think of anyone who's gotten to the end of it and been like, yeah, no.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? At some point, the wall kind of starts coming down if it's been something they've been forced to do, and they start really recognizing themselves in the brain facts and again, it's that you're planting those seeds and it's getting cultivated. What I think is really fascinating, and I know this doesn't have to do with education, it's more your personal story, but how easily a healthy human being who's just living life can start to shift into those hardwires that you mentioned in your brain and start to have those fears of going out of the house, and then how those panic attacks can start out of the blue. And it's just amazing how quickly that can evolve and then really paralyze people.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't realize it. You don't realize that it's happening until it happens, and then you're like, "Whoa! What? How? Where did I get here? I thought everything was just fine.
I'm just going along
Wait
life.
a minute, yeah. Where did this come from?" So yeah. Well, and I'll say too, in my 23 years of teaching, as we mentioned, I've never felt more comfortable or more passionate about teaching a topic than I do this. Like when I get to do speaking engagements, just to talk about this to a crowd of people, I am my best self. I feel like, whoo, this is what I was meant to do. I love this. And it's the same thing with any little class. I just taught a little health class the other day over a Zoom call to like 5 people, and you could just tell how passionate I was about what I was teaching them, and that comes through to the person on the other side.
Out. Yes, our presence.
Yeah,
right.
And that's what we talk about: embodying it and living it, and we're not just talking the talk.
No, we're walking the walk, and we have to make sure that we keep holding ourselves accountable for that. And that's what I love about our community of support within Mindful Momentum, but also, surrounding ourselves with our tribe that helps us be that better self, because it is easy to shift back into autopilot and start to let that negativity, kind of get too close, and we can get fixated on that. I mean, we're certainly not short of
another
negativity.
thing that ties into teenagers too, that is a big piece of what you teach, is self-compassion.
Yeah.
And they don't have that tool yet. They don't have that. And that was a huge piece for me. And to be able to teach them that skill, or just to have awareness about having what self-compassion looks like and how they can give that to themselves, because they beat themselves up a lot. I mean, we all do. And but teenagers especially.
And it's such an important part of being successful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to honor the fact that I am imperfect, whether, no matter any age, unfortunately, we're always going to be making mistakes, but to learn to give ourselves grace.
I run into so many kids, of course, but adults that refuse to be wrong or refuse to admit that they messed up. And And I mean, I was probably like that at some point too. Like, I'm not admitting I'm wrong. But when you learn self-compassion, then it's so much easier to be like, yeah, I messed up. Or I did that wrong, or I did, and it's not that big of a deal.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, I feel better admitting that I did it wrong than trying to act like I didn't.
Yes.
So that's another huge piece of the mindfulness curriculum that you have, but also very, very important for teenagers and their teachers.
Well, and the ripple effect of that is then when we give ourselves that self-compassion, we're much more able to give it to other people. That's the gift we give others, isn't it? And and it's like I feel like it's interesting because I feel like it helps also when we acknowledge our own less than. It gives people an opportunity to recognize their own less than elements.
Mm-hmm.
I was just speaking with someone recently, and they were my age, and they were kind of feeling bad that they weren't on a path that they wanted to be on, and because they had started a venture and it didn't work out, and I said, life is a curvy road. It's always changing. And we've all been down paths that we think are right. And it's like, oh, this isn't where I planned to go. So how do I shift and how do I adapt? And the look on her face, it was so interesting. Just kind of like that, like her own disappointment in herself of telling me that kind of just went away. And she was like, yeah, you're right. That's true. But it was acknowledging that we're all in that space. But we have these, and of course social media affects that. Like we think everyone has it like all together and everybody's just, doing amazing things all the time with no mistakes. And the fact is that is just not accurate.
Well, kids are on their phone all the time too. This is a whole nother topic.
Yes.
That they are on their phone all of the time. So there's a teaching tool right there of tying mindfulness, self-compassion, it's okay to mess up, you don't have to be perfect, into comparing it to what they're seeing online and making that a real world.
And what are they exposing themselves to?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I love about that awareness piece. Anytime I'm talking with people about technology usage, and we have to decide that for ourselves, and teens do too, but even evaluating, gosh, when I spend time online, how does it make me feel? When I notice myself comparing myself to everything or feeling excluded from all these things that everyone else is doing and their lives look so good, Instagram perfect or whatever. And then recognizing I have the power to set up some of those boundaries so that I don't allow that to influence me in a negative way. But every teen has to come up with themselves, right?
Yeah.
I mean, as parents, we certainly can put up boundaries.
Yeah, and that can just be a conversation that needs to be happening.
Yes.
We keep saying curriculum, but whether that's a part of a social emotional learning lesson or not, we need to be talking to kids about what they need, not what we might think that they need, which all educators are guilty of at some point. Yeah. But that was one thing I wanted to bring up in this podcast is that they will let me know what they need to learn from me. They'll let me know what their fears are.
And you're present.
Yes, and present. And then that's where the conversations can go. Rarely did it start with, okay, guys, this is the topic I'm talking about today, and then it stay on that topic. They would then guide it where it needed to go.
Into something meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's relatable to them in their life at their moment. Yeah.
Exactly.
But we have to be mindful to be presenting that, to be able to go
there.
And
give up that control, which we talk as teachers all the time, to give up that control of what you had planned. And that's
teachable moments.
Absolutely.
Aren't those always the best?
And it is the best. It is the best. That's what we could hope for.
I know.
To happen in our classroom.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have much work to do.
Yes, we do.
But I always feel like we hang on to hope that we are impacting kids, even when it's just one kiddo. I'm reminded that all the time on days where I feel like I'm taking 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, and these expectations of changing the world. Well, if I can just impact one person at a time, like it's a win, and it's one person's life that's changed or transformed or whatever that may be. So, so thank you for the good work that you are doing and how you're finding ways, because we have to be creative. And it sounds
gotta
like
be
you've been
creative. Yep.
creative.
And just in talking with you today, I have a few more ideas that I might be able to put into place.
And I'm always looking for ways of, and that really prompts me to continue to stay open to see those opportunities, because as humans, we like to get it all planned out and figure it out and know exactly where we're going, and sometimes it just doesn't happen that way. And so it's being able to, adapt and change and see those places.
Keep trying.
Keep trying, yes. And I am excited. One of the things that, and I haven't really shared, but I started working with an early childhood center.
Oh,
So
okay.
again, talking about starting early.
Yeah.
And meeting different people who are really engaged in that space of how do we really start teaching these things, the littles, these skills. And it's good. It's good. We're as my friend Nancy says, onward and upward. We just keep on keeping on. So thanks so much for being here.
This is great. It was so fun to talk to you about, obviously, something that we both love to talk about.
Yes, I know. We could keep going on and on.
Thank you for letting me be here.
Absolutely. Well, like, comment, subscribe, go to the website. But we are here to inspire and empower your journey. So let's all continue to grow so that we all can flourish. See you next time.